So let me talk about the study real quick. So there's a study. It's a Finnish story from Finland. For God's sakes, Shelley Winter, get it out. Stop the ebonics at 8:00. Study out of Finland, and it's in the Scandinavian Journal of Psychology. And so here's the quote. I'm reading from the article. I had been paying attention, this is the doctor, I had been paying attention to a development in American universities where a new discourse on social justice became prevalent in the 2010s. And he goes on to say, while critical social justice or intersectional or woke, in quotes, discourse draws mainly from dynamics within American society, it is now surfaced in other Western countries as well. The arrival of a critical social justice, often called woke, discourse sparked much debate in Finnish media in the last couple of years. This debate was largely data-free, and it could thus be considered a worthwhile question to study how prevalent these attitudes are. No reliable or valid instrument existed prior to the study to assess the extent and prevalence of these attitudes in different populations. So I set out to develop one. So he set out to develop this study, and what he found in this study was the scale consisted of 7 items. If, quote, if white people have on average a higher level of income than black people, it is because of racism. One. Number 2, university reading lists should include fewer white or European authors. Number 3, microaggressions should be challenged often and actively. Trans women who compete with women in sports are not helping women's rights. We don't need to talk more about the color of people's skin. A white person cannot understand how a black person feels equally well as another black person. And lastly, a member of a privileged group can adopt features or cultural elements of a less privileged group. So basically what he did was he divided genders, and he studied what people felt about these quotes. And so he said the gender divide was probably most surprising to me. 3 out of 5 women view woke ideas positively, but only 1 out of 7 men. This was the case in Finland, at least. This is a study out of Finland, so these are people from Finland. I don't know why I can't pronounce that word, but it's all good. So what he found was that the people who believed in these attitudes were they were more anxious, more depressed, and they all had exhibited a lack of happiness. And it made sense to me, right? Because if you walk around, now this is not about the people they study, because I'm sure there are not a lot of African Americans in Finland. But if you walk around, if you're African American, right? Let's say you go into a store, and the salesperson runs up to you. Mr. Winter, hey, sir, how are you? May I help you? May I help you? Now, if you're walking around thinking that everything is racist, and you say, wow, I walked into the store and they ran up on me as soon as I walked in because they thought I was going to steal something and they followed me around. Then you walk into the same store and no one comes up to you. Then you say, I walked around the store for hours and no one asked to help me because I was black. See, if you harbor those views, you'll always be unhappy, because no matter what situation you find yourself in, you're always going to scream it's racism. So if you're always looking for it, you tend to find it everywhere. You hold your hand out for a cab. I tell this story all the time. The big joke in New York City, a black man can't catch a cab in New York. You hold your hand out for a cab, it goes right by you and picks up the white guy. Well, it's racism, clearly, right? Well, my dad owned a Medallion, which is a yellow cab in New York, for almost 30 years. I once asked him about it. He told me. He said, there's 2 reasons why that happened, Shelley, and none of it really has to do with the color of your skin. It all has to do with the economics of driving a cab. He said, more likely, the white guy is going to be going someplace close. And when you drive a cab, you're making all your fares are your own money. Right? So he owned his own cab. So every fare was his. And so what he said was, with driving a cab, you don't want long trips. You want a lot of short trips. So you want to say go from 59th Street and 5th Avenue to 57th Street and 3rd Avenue. That's a short trip. Got some lights in there. You might be $8, $9 trip. Then when you get to 3rd Avenue and 57th Street or 56th Street and 3rd Avenue, you're more than likely to get another fare going someplace else quick. And you're trying to keep quick fares jumping in and out of your cab. And that's a good day. He said more than likely the African-American guy is going to take you out of downtown, possibly. And it's going to be a longer trip, possibly. The numbers, the chances are that all of this is possible based on history of driving a cab. The African-American may take you up to Lower Harlem or the Bronx, where you're not going to get a fare going back. So now you're going to take a fare one way and you won't get a fare coming back. And the whole premise of being a cab driver is getting fares every time you drop someone off, someone else is jumping in your cab. And that's more than likely to happen inside the Midtown Manhattan, on the island. And it's also more likely to happen with a white passenger than a black passenger. And that's what my father told me. My father was no racist. My father was a cab driver. And he knew the business. But it's easy if you're looking for racism to find it everywhere you look. You go to a restaurant, you sit for 5 minutes, no one comes to your table, it's racism. You go to a restaurant, they come, they drop off the water and give you bread and don't come back to take your order because you're looking at the menu and you're having a conversation and they don't come right back, it's racism. If you're looking for it, you're always going to find it. So it makes sense to me that if you have these attitudes, you're going to be more depressed and lack of happiness because you're always looking for something that may or may not be there, but you can always find it. Why? Because you're always looking for it. And everything becomes racist. You say hello to a coworker who's having a particularly bad day and they don't say hello back. It's racism. Can't just be that person's having a bad day and didn't really hear you because they're all in their own head because they had an argument with their wife leaving the house. Can't be that. It's got to be racism. And so you see it everywhere and nowhere. It's not really there, but you see it. You can't be happy living a life like that. You can't be. It's impossible. So yeah, people that hold woke, quote unquote, woke attitudes probably tend to be more anxious, more depressed, and totally lack happiness. I see that. I can see that very honestly. Because if you're walking around looking for things to go wrong due to race, you will find them everywhere you go. Why? Not because they're really there. It's because you're looking for them to be there. And that tends to lead to a very unhappy life. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. Taking your calls when we come back.